Welcome back to Sunday Evening Devotions. I'd like to take us to a text in Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah, chapter 33. The context has been God's judgment, promised judgment actually, against Israel and his people because of their sins in violating his covenant, and the promise that he would send a means of that judgment, the Assyrian Empire. They did come, and God used them to take his people into captivity, and he judged them. In this particular chapter, chapter 33, Isaiah promises that God would judge the Assyrians. Now that may seem odd to us, but God uses the nations, and he judges the nations. He's the God of righteousness. And men's wickedness and their evil intent he uses for the good purposes. In this case, it was the judgment of his people to humble them. But he would also judge the Assyrians for their treachery and their violence, just as God may use nations in our day to judge others, because God is at work. So there is the promise. But in the midst of this promise, there is the prayer. And that is Isaiah 33, verse 2. O Lord, be gracious to us. We wait for you. Be our arm every morning, our salvation in the time of trouble. We are living in times of trouble, and where do we find comfort? We find comfort only in God. We are to remember that God has a faithful, fatherly kindness to his people, to his church. That God does not take us out of the misery of the world, of sin and its battles, but rather he promises to care for his own in that misery. He uses that misery, that trial, to sanctify his own. The question for you is, where are you? Who are you? Are you part of God's people? Does he have a fatherly care for you? Or are you his enemy? And even though he may work in your life in certain ways, even as he used the Assyrians, he turned around and he judged the Assyrians for their sin. God will certainly judge all of us for our sin, one way or another. And it'll either be judged in the person of Christ, his Son, or you will bear the full brunt of that guilt. So remember that God is of fatherly kindness. And if you're not aware of that, if that seems strange to you, then call upon God as your Father. For we're to remember, secondly, of his might. O Lord, be gracious to us, have pity, we wait for you, be our arm every morning. Here we see the strength, the might of God's arm. God is mighty to save. He has the ability. In fact, if God does not save, no one is saved. God must act, and he must act first. And so, while there is a difference sometimes in how we might understand this verse, is it be our arm or be their arm? Some reflecting on the fact that Isaiah was thinking about the fact that God was the arm of their strength in the past, such as in the days of Moses, and therefore would be their strength in the present circumstance or in future circumstances. Nonetheless, even though that is a scriptural argument, God alone has the strength and the power to save. We must remember that. But remember, God also has the strength and the power to judge. He will judge all unrighteousness. Is he using his arm for your salvation and deliverance, or is he using his arm to judge you? Thirdly, then, remember that God alone saves. Be our salvation in the time of trouble. We are living in troubled times. Our only hope is not in the things of this world, whether it be money, fame, power, or any other thing, family, or what we may devise. Our only deliverance is God, and it is in the person of his Son, the Lord Jesus Christ. Despite the trial due to judgment that may fall around us, God alone delivers his own. We cannot save ourselves. Our comfort is in the fact that God saves. Nothing else in this world saves. And so there is only deliverance in God. And there is no deliverance without God. And that is the point. And that is the great question for you tonight. Is God's arm your strength Is his salvation your salvation? Or are you trying to rely on your own strength to get through the trials that are coming or are about you? Are you thinking that you can save yourself, that God will simply look kindly upon your good intentions? No, God alone must save. And I call you to faith in Jesus Christ, the one who has defeated death and conquered sin and Satan for all who put their trust in him. O Lord, be gracious to us. We wait in hope upon you. Good night.